Here we go. We're going to get through a couple different things happening currently in the NFL. Alvin Kamara, one of the highly paid NFL running backs.
Yeah.
We don't talk much about his situation. I'm surprised they haven't squeezed him to take less. And maybe they would have. Maybe they would have even considered trading him, but he's got hanging over him the incident arising from the Pro Bowl in Las Vegas, early 2022. It all happened when we were in L.A. He got arrested for allegedly or charged. I can't remember whether they ultimately – they arrested him at the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Hell, it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah.
They waited for him at the Pro Bowl, arrested him at the Pro Bowl because he and others allegedly beat some guy up, and there's surveillance video. It was outside of a nightclub at a casino. Everyone was there from the NFL who had been at the Pro Bowl. Not everyone at that time, but everyone was in the city, so things like that potentially could happen.
Right.
And it happened. So there was a recent guilty plea or no contest to misdemeanor charge. The criminal case is over. The civil case is settled, but there's one order of business left, and that's to go meet with the commissioner. And the way this works now, it used to be you meet with the commissioner decides what he's going to do, and that's pretty much it. He controls everything. Yeah, you can appeal, but he controls everything.
Right.
Now the NFL proposes punishment. Judge Sue L. Robinson, remember her from last year with Deshaun Watson.
Sure.
She'll have a hearing. She'll decide the facts, she'll decide the appropriate punishment, and then that's it, with the NFL only having jurisdiction over not the facts, but the punishment based on the facts that she finds as they happen. But there's surveillance video. I think there's questions of self-defense, there's questions of provocation, but the video shows that there was some sort of an assault that was committed and Alvin Kamara was involved. So he's meeting with the commissioner today. And the clock's ticking toward week one, man. I mean, they got to move pretty quickly. They got to move pretty quickly if they want to get this done before week one. And there's a point where it's like, well, when are you going to do it if you're going to do it before week one?
You're doing a disservice to the team a little bit by dragging your feet through this a little bit here. I know. I'm a little surprised, too, that it's taken this long to kind of come to this point. It's a major player, a major piece for the Saints offense. It's a huge year for Dennis Allen, the head coach. I'm sure he'd like this to be resolved so he can figure out what they're going to do with their team if he does get suspended for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it may be. It's a big year for Alvin Kamara for sure. Like you just brought up with his contract and all that. Yeah, now he's got to deal with this. Will he get suspended? I don't know, right? And he's being paid as one of the 2 highest paid running backs in football. And he hasn't, played to that capability or stayed healthy to that capability the last 2 years. He's still real good, but I don't think anybody puts Alvin Kamara in the, he's the best running back in football conversation, But he's very important to their offense, what they do there. And, I'll be interested to see what happens here, Mike. I don't know. What are you expecting? You have an expectation going into this? Do you think we're going to see a 1-2 game suspension because of this incident?
After the Ray Rice incident in 2014, the NFL changed the personal conduct policy to make the baseline punishment for any physical assault 6 games. But it can go up and it can go down.
Right.
So I think the goal would be to try to argue that there should be something significantly lower than 6. That's where this idea of provocation comes into play. Self-defense, whatever it is that he tries to articulate to the commissioner, that's a precursor to the argument that will be advanced to Judge Sue L. Robinson. And even though the meeting's happening just now, things can move pretty quickly. They've known about this for a long time. They were just waiting for the criminal case to end. The criminal case ended fairly recently. One of the things they learned from the Ray Rice case and others is don't make any judgments until we know exactly what's gone on with the potential for criminal charges. So now that that's over, they can move forward. And I think they could expedite. They could get Judge Robinson. I assume they're paying her well when they activate the bat signal for her services. They'll get her on board. It's not a complicated hearing. It's not going to take a week. It's a day, probably. If it's more than a day, it's a day and a half. She issues her ruling. The NFL handles the appeal if there is one, and they get it all done by week one. The other possibility, too, and we have to take this into account because Kamara resolved without litigation the criminal cases, resolved without litigation the civil case, they could just reach a settlement. He could meet with the commissioner, and then the NFL's lawyers and Kamara's representatives can hammer out a 1 or 2 game suspension, and that's it, and we just move on. That's possible as well.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll see where it goes. the Saints, like we talked about, Jamal Williams there, right? So he's certainly going to have to, pull the workman's load, right, or whatever there for Alvin Kamara. They did draft that Kendry Miller from TCU, who has a lot of Alvin Kamara type skills. He reminds me of him. I wrote down when I was doing my draft evaluation. So I would think, hey, yeah, they need Alvin Kamara. I would also say I would think this is Alvin Kamara's last year as being a New Orleans Saint, unless he takes a dramatic salary reduction or something along those lines. But it'll be interesting to see, because I know you and I are both on the Saints. Could be one of those teams that didn't make the playoffs last year, but there's some pieces there where you go, when I got to really pick the NFC playoff picture, the Saints might be one of those teams I pick, out of nowhere to kind of join the party here this year, because there is some good to go around with the new quarterback in Derek Carr.
After this year, his salary goes to $10.2 million. I mean,
what is it? How much?
$10.2 million next year. What have we learned this year?
Yeah, that's too much.
No one's paying him $10.2 million next year.
Right.
And then the year after that, that's the Fugazi year that bumped the average to $15 million. That's one of the things that the union pointed out on the running back call that they did. Hey, some of these agents are doing these deals that create average salaries that aren't real.
Yeah.
So you guys get ideas in your heads that are unfounded.
Right.
Alvin Kamara's not making $15 million a year.
Right.
The only reason you think it's $15 million is because he got a $25 million compensation package on the phony final year that drove the average from 13.5 to 15.
Right.
So he's got this year, next year.
Right.
Next year's not happening without a major contract restructuring. And you know what? Next year is the year I start thinking, does he end up in Denver with Sean Payton? Mm-hmm. Sean Payton's the guy who discovered it.
Sure. I don't think that's a crazy thought at all, right? Come there. We got Javonte Williams. He'll be our go-to, between the tackles, pounding in there type of runner. But Alvin, who has great value, we know as a runner, but his real value is that, as we talk about with Christian McCaffrey and some of these other running backs in football, he's like a receiver running routes out of the backfield. That's where he's awesome. We know Sean Payton loves to do that. I could certainly see that happening a year from now. You're onto something there.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.